Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to IEA Bioenergy Webinar Series. My name is Chiara Benetti, and I welcome you on behalf of ETA Florence Renewable Energies, technical organizer of this webinar. Today's webinar is entitled Informing Land Use Decisions About Consequences for Biodiversity, and it's moderated by Goran Bernbes, professor at Chalmers University of Technology, Sweden, and by Sohail Shayek, director for the strategic program integration of the planetary biogeochemical and industrial carbon cycle at CMCC Italy. And today's speakers are Paul Borg-Jessen, professor, Department of Technology and Society at Lund University, Sweden. Per Angelstam, professor at the University of Inland Norway and guest professor at Rijksuniversiteit Groningen, the Netherlands. And Ola Eriksson, professor at the Department of Forestry and Wood Technology, Linnaeus University, Sweden. The Q&A session will be also moderated by Floor van der Hilst, professor at Utrecht University from the Netherlands. During today's webinar, we'll have two different Q&A sessions, one at the end of Paul's presentation, so at the end of the first presentation, and the second one after Per presentation and Ola's presentation. As usual, you have the possibility to drop questions by using the Q&A tab that you can find at the bottom of your screen. So please do not use the chat for questions, but the Q&A tab. And the webinar is recorded, and the recording and the presentations of the webinar will be available on IEA Bioenergy website starting from tomorrow. So that's all from my side. I leave the floor to Goran, and enjoy the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiara. Thanks a lot. I will start with giving a brief introduction to IEA Bioenergy as one of the organizers. I hope that you can see this now. IEA Bioenergy, that is a so-called technology cooperation program that I will tell you a little bit about, and Task 45 is one of the thematic working areas within IEA Bioenergy. So these technology cooperating programs, they are a function set up within the International Energy Agency. There are quite many of those. So we are in a big family, you can say, on different thematic areas related to energy issues. So specifically for IEA Bioenergy TCP, we have then the same overall goals as the other TCPs about international collaboration and information exchange, and in our case then specifically on bioenergy related. And we are also to facilitate commercialization and market deployment of bioenergy systems that are sustainable, and sustainability is here referring to a quite broad criteria lists relating both to that it should be climate positive, environmentally sound, socially acceptable, and cost competitive. Currently, there are 24 members. Most of these are countries. We also have European Commission involved as a member. And we have a work program that is carried out by these so-called tasks, where we are one of the tasks in Task 45. And we also have special projects being carried out in 3 year for the periods. We are expected to have national representation in all these countries, connecting to the expertise and ongoing nationally funded research in all the countries. So we have a quite wide involvement of experts, and the ones that are more directly involved, you could say, is maybe on the order of 200, but the community that contributes through seminars, workshops, providing reports, that's a much wider community. And as I said, we are organized in tasks, and as you can see here, we are on the order of 10 tasks now, roughly, and task 45 then has the thematic area climate and sustainability effects of bioenergy within the broader bioeconomy. And people working within task 45 are also contributing to what we call inter-task projects. And this triennium here now, we have 3 inter-task projects running, and you can see them listed here: management of biogenic CO2. We called it BECUS because we referred both to sequestration with the S and utilization with the U. We have then bioeconomy synergies, where we see synergies between different biomass uses for different purposes, not only energy purposes. And we have one of these projects on expanding the resource base, which this time is primarily focusing on industrial side streams and residue flows. But that can vary over time how focus is. And finally, specifically, the objective of TOS 45. As you saw on the title, we cover environmental and sustainability effects in a broad sense. Our objective is to increase the understanding of environmental, social, and economic impacts of producing and using biomass for bioenergy within the broader bioeconomy. We refer to the broader bioeconomy because bioenergy systems are very often one component that is integrated within more broader systems that also produce many other bio-based products. We are in different ways communicating and disseminating findings, clarifying also the rules of bioenergy, how that will vary geographically and over time, depending on, of course, the demand for energy services, but also depending on the development of alternative energy supply options, because that defines partly over time where the best strategic use of bioenergy is. And that, as I said, changes over time, but it can also vary geographically because countries are more and well suited with alternative renewable energy sources. The task also works a lot on developing and applying methodologies and tools for assessing effects of bio-based systems. And in that function, we also contribute to the development of standards and the shaping of sustainability certification systems, for instance. And we are also engaging in trying to understand how such certification systems and standards work in practice when they are implemented in relation to requirements in different countries and regions on performance of bio-based systems. Yes, that was actually my brief introduction here. I would like to leave the word also to my colleague Suhail here, who represents the other organizer of this webinar. Please, Suhail.
Yes, thank you very much, Goran, and thank you, IEA Bioenergy Group, for having us here and letting us also sponsor this very interesting talk. We are looking forward to hearing from the speakers. I'm just gonna give you a very brief introduction to CMCC and the uptake project that is relevant to the talk today and to the activities of this group. So I'm gonna share my presentation with you and start from there. Okay. So as I mentioned, I'm from CMCC Foundation in Italy. CMCC is a leading research center focused on understanding the interaction between climate change and society. We are based in Italy, but as you can see in the map, we have representation all across the country in different cities in Italy. Overall, we have about 450 researchers and staff that are distributed across 3 main institutes focusing on different aspects of climate change science, climate change impacts, and also climate policy. We have also cross-cutting programs. We have 3 cross-cutting programs, as you can see on the figure on the right side. One is on the integration of planetary biogeochemical and industrial carbon cycle, the one that I am directing at CMCC. The other 2 programs, one is focused on the global coast and the one is on the impacts of climate change. Few words about the program relevant also to the discussions that we have in this group. So we have 3 main objectives for this program. Basically integrating carbon accounting. We are talking about integrating satellite imagery and Earth observation with in situ observation to better understand the carbon cycle fluxes and account for changes in the carbon cycle that we can observe. The other ones are one net zero, we call it, basically integrating the mitigation efforts with carbon dioxide removals. And I will talk a little bit about that also through the project that we have uptake. And finally, adaptive carbon management, looking at both adaptation and mitigation together in efforts to not only reduce the impacts of climate change, but also try to limit our footprint on the climate by reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. So about the uptake project, this is the project that is funded by European Commission under the Horizon program. It has started in September 2023 and it will go for 4 years. It will finish next year in 2027. As you can see the list of partners, we have about 20 partners across Europe mainly, and CMCC is coordinating this project. We have a online community and for stakeholders to get engaged with this project. The project is mainly about upscaling carbon dioxide removals. What are the conditions for carbon dioxide removal in terms of not only technological advancement, but also the governance and other requirements in terms of financing and business models for carbon dioxide removal. In order to join this basically discussions that we have in this project, you can just scan this QR code. It will allow you to join our online community and learn more about the project and also interact with the results of the project. As part of the project, also we are organizing an international conference, the 4th International Conference on Carbon Dioxide Removal. You may know it also with previously as International Conference on Negative CO2 Emissions. This is the 4th edition of this conference, which will happen 10th to 12th of June in Milano, Italy, hosted by Politecnico di Milano and organized by the Uptake Project. The registration will open from next week for general public. So if you are interested to come to this conference and also learn more about the cutting edge research in the carbon dioxide removal, you can visit our website. So this is another QR code for you to scan and then learn about how to register and participate in this conference. Thank you very much. I will stop here and leave the floor for our presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Suhail. Then I'm glad to announce the first speaker now in this webinar, and that is Paul Börjesson. Paul will talk about quantifying biodiversity impacts of bioenergy systems and then latest developments in the scope of LCA. This is partly connected to also informing about a report that was published late last year, actually, based on a project going on in Sweden, but also with IEA Bioenergy as a supporting organization. So we have a publication online. It's available on the IEA Bioenergy website. Paul, please. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Göran, and thank you for inviting me to this webinar. So I will try to talk about here the role of LCA in the evaluation of biodiversity impacts of bioenergy system. And as Göran said, this is a project that is financed by the Swedish program Mistra Biopath. And the report Göran was also talking about is written by me and my colleague Carla Coelho and Henrik Smith at Lund University in Sweden. And the report is edited by Göran Berndes. So we have tried to do a review and look how the status is now regarding life cycle assessment and also to try to cover biodiversity impacts. We'll see here. All right. So first of all, we have looked into how to define or what approaches that we work with today or are suggested that we can work with. And this is a summary by Krenna et al., how you can classify different kind of approaches here. And they have divided in between within LCA approaches and beyond LCA approaches. So the thing that I will talk mostly about today is the left part here, that we have these operational models and methods that are used today. And then also in the case study that I will present in the end of my talk is how a company can use this. So it relates to approaches applied by businesses. So this case study is trying to connect the methods that are available today and how energy company working with bioenergy could use this. But of course, we have also not yet operational models and methods that I will also mention. And beyond LCA, we can see that we have approaches that follow life cycle thinking and also environmental services accounting approaches, but I will not cover that today. And when we gone through the status today, we have also identified some very critical aspects, parameters, etc., that is still discussed, how you can, what approach you should have, or how you can use different parameters in different ways. And one is related to reference land use. So the coherency between the choice of reference land use and biodiversity footprint is a critical aspect here. And this is a suggestion here by Soimekalo et al. Depending on what aim you have with assessment, then you should choose the most suitable reference land use. So if it's more general effects of land use, suitable reference land use could be the potential natural regeneration in this case. But if you go to look into how a changed land use will affect biodiversity, then it might be more relevant to use business as usual or projected future when it comes to reference land use. And also, if we involve policies and policy targets and comparing the ecosystem value of the studied land, then it might be most relevant to have the historic baseline in this case. So depending on the aim, you will choose the most appropriate reference land use here. And another critical aspect is the spatial resolution. Because as you all understand and know, the localities that we study may have very different background and levels when it comes to biodiversity. And also, it might differ in the proportion of threatened or endemic species which they harbor. And also, especially when it comes to life cycle assessment, and you look into the effects on a functional unit, for example, or a biofuel in this case, the productivity of the land is very crucial. Because that determines the need of occupied area needed for producing this unit, for example, 1 liter of biofuel or megajoule of biofuel. And I will show that in the case study that this could have a significant impact how the productivity is regarding the specific production place. And this is a summary from Damiani et al. About the different impact assessment methods that are available today, both used or proposed. And we can see there is several different parameters or aspects that varies in these approaches or methods. And for example, how much are included related to parameters that will affect the biodiversity, like the pressure from land use or climate change, toxicity or invasive species, or fragmentation of ecosystems. And also differences in reference stage, as I showed in the previous slide, change. And also a very crucial thing here is the quality of the data and the availability of the data. So we can see that the different methods or approaches use different kind of data. It could be from literature, it could be from databases, maps, or surveys or other. So here is a very crucial aspect also, where the data comes from and the quality of the data. And we also see that there are differences in land use classes and land use intensities that are used in the methods that are around. And also differences in biodiversity impact metrics. So such as genetic composition and species population, species traits, community composition, ecosystem functioning, and ecosystem structure. So an overall conclusion from this is that there is no single method that is able to capture all the variety of the pressures on biodiversity and ecosystem and taxonomic groups. So that's very important to have in mind, that we have to live with that it's impossible to cover everything. But the idea is how can we do it as good as possible based on the knowledge and the methods developed and the data available today. And one critical thing, as I mentioned before also, this is a problem today, is the sparsity of biodiversity data that leads to that we, to a large extent, work with indirect biodiversity indicators instead. And this is also the case in the case study that I will continue with now. So within this Mr. Biopath project, we work with industry, and one example is Kraftringen, which is a energy company located in southern Sweden. They have a quite large heat and power production plant in the city of Lund in southern Sweden, and they deliver district heat to several cities around. And they use mainly forest fuels for their production. And in this case, they use logging residues in form of tops and branches from the forest around this or from this region, which are collected after felling of the forest stands. So we wanted to see, and they wanted to see, what effect of their fuels will have on biodiversity. So this study was done by Anton Kvarnbäck, and the objective of this study was quantifying the biodiversity impact related to logging residue removal. And logging residue in this case, as I said, is tops and branches. So in this case, this method developed by Linno et al. Was used, called the biodiversity value increment method. And this method has been used for forest operations and production of forest products, etc. But now we try to see, could this be also used for the harvest of logging residues and for energy purposes. So this method is using the reference state here. It's called the maximum biodiversity quality potential of the land, which is equivalent to the natural state. And the land use impact is presented as reduced biodiversity quality from the intervention, and it's equivalent to the occupation impact. And this also method is used using indicators, for example, not species richness approach. So it's indirectly effects of biodiversity in this case. And the parameters or the indicators that has been pointed out as crucial and important in this case is listed on the left side here. It's the number of old trees in the forest stand or at the forest property, and the tree species diversity, and also the extent of exotic species, the amount of dead wood, and not only dead wood, but also the diameter of the wood. Is it coarse dead wood or it's a thin dead wood? It's also different, important to differ that. And lastly, also the residue removal, how much of the logging residues that are actually collected and harvested. And then you can see here that we have also done an evaluation of the relationship between the different indicators here, and also gauging their importance of the effect of the biodiversity potential. And this has been done by interviews, expert interviews. 7 different biodiversity experts has been involved in this, coming up with this judgment, how important the different indicators are for the biodiversity in this specific forest here, and also the relationships, and also weighting the importance. So, for example, we can look at on the bottom, almost in the bottom, dead wood with a diameter less than 10 centimeters have a weight of 5%. But if we go up in the middle here, we can see dead wood with a diameter over 50 centimeters will have a 15% impact. So it's more important to save coarse dead wood than dead wood with a low diameter. And on the top, you can see number of old trees. That's very important also from the most important factor for the biodiversity, that we keep and spare old trees in this case. So in the situation in southern Sweden, we have both spruce forest, and it's mainly the main part comes from that, logging residues from spruce forest, and it's quite fine logging residues or tops and branches from this category of fuel. But we have also, for example, beech trees, and here we have logging residues which are more represent more coarse tops and branches. So they might be more important to save for biodiversity purposes. So depending on what kind of forest residues you use, this might have then a different impact of the biodiversity. So step one, when you do this assessment, is to try to calculate the maximum biodiversity quality potential in the existing forest and forest stands. So this has been done, and it represents the bar on the left. So it's 1, that's the maximum biomass potential or biodiversity potential. And the different color here represent different kind of indicators. So the blue part on the bottom is the number of old trees, for example. And other colors you can see it's tree species diversity and deadwood in different diameters. And then the other bars represent 7 different properties that was included in this assessment. And it's represent also a number of different forest stands here. So it's 12 forest stands. And so that showed the situation today. For example, the forest property A on the left-hand side of the figure here, we can see it's quite low biodiversity, actual biodiversity quality potential. Whereas if we go to F, the property F has a much higher biodiversity quality today. So the first step is to evaluate the base situation, how it looks like in the forest properties or in the individual forest stands where we will recover logging residues. And then step 2 is calculate the effects of the recovery of the logging residues. So the yellow bars represent without removal, the ones that I show in the previous slide, and the blue part is after removal, and the red part is the difference between if we save logging residues or we harvest them. And then once again, you can look at property A on the left-hand side, and that property include 2 forest sites. It's one with spruce and one with beech. And you can see here, for example, when we take out the tops and branches from the final felling of beech, that might have a quite significant impact on the biodiversity, since the red part is quite high here. Whereas once again, we can go to property F, which include both spruce and pine forest. And here we can see that the output of logging residues will have a very marginal effect on biodiversity. And this is because these forest stands contain a quite high biodiversity already from the start. There is a lot of deadwood, old trees, etc. in the stands here. So this is the second step. And then the third step is that we need to recalculate this to a functional unit, as I said, since we do this life cycle assessment. And in this case, it's kilowatt-hour of district heat delivered from this heat and power plant. So here we recalculate and express it to a functional unit. And here we can see in property C that we have both a spruce stand but also a pine stand. And here we see that this will give a significant increase in impact when we recalculate this to a functional unit. It hadn't that big impact in the previous slide, but now it will have it because the yield from this site is quite low. So the amount of biomass per hectare that we harvest in form of logging residues is quite low. So then, of course, the impact of the biodiversity expressed per functional unit will be much higher. So this is a very clearly show the importance of also the productivity of the soil or the land, and how much biomass we actually can take out per hectare from the different systems here. All right, so try to do some conclusion from this case study and some inputs to Kraftringen about the impact from their fuels that they are using. That we can see that logging residues from a specific tree species do not appear particularly bad. We can find a quite good system where the impact will be quite limited. But we also see that retaining coarse native branches and restricting removal area are effective ways to reduce biodiversity impact. So we can see that maybe the recommendation will be developed that if we have less dead, a low amount of dead wood and coarse dead wood in a forest, it will be even more important to save coarse tops and branches in these forests here. And finally, also, as I said, the impact is dependent on the presence of other dead wood. So the initial state of the forest stand or the forest properties define to a large extent how the impact will be when we also harvest logging residues. If we zoom out and talk more general and also based on the findings in the report here, we can summarize some critical aspects, and I have already mentioned some of them. And we have the spatial scale, the geographical system boundaries that are very important if we look at individual forest stands, or we look at forest properties, or we look at more landscape scale. That, of course, will be important also when we look into the biodiversity impacts here. And data availability is crucial. And here we see opportunities when we develop these remote sensing technologies, that data availability will hopefully be better and better. But still, we mainly work with biodiversity indicators. So that's also a crucial thing to do this validation between the indicators and the actual effects of the biodiversity. For example, verifying species richness here as one example. So this is a very important area that we need to work more with. And also when we talk about the bioenergy system, it's often we have byproducts along the way when we produce the final bioenergy carrier. And so allocation approaches will also another thing that we need to work further with. And of course, reference land use, as I talked about before. So even though this is very complex, it's very hard, it's very tricky to do this, we can anyway see a great value of trying to do this, because this brings an opportunity to companies, but also policymakers, to better understand the potential biodiversity performance of various biomass supply systems. As I showed, that in this case, the energy company Kraftringen, they have much better knowledge now about the effects depending on where and how much and what kind of logging residues that are harvested and used for district heat in their power, combined power and heat and power production plants at Lund. So they have also the possibilities to work with the improvements together with fuel supplies in this case. And also the ongoing development of improved biodiversity impact models and the collection of data for example, based on biodiversity indicators and remote sensing methods here, will open up for increasingly better practical assessment methods that could be used for example, energy companies in this work. So yeah, the conclusion is this is tricky, it's very complex, but there is a very big value of trying to do this, and there is also potential for different kind of improvements in both the methods, approaches, data availability, and also for companies using this. And a lot of companies, they are using LCA for their climate footprint. So they are very keen on if they can use the similar approach or tool to also include biodiversity here. So there is a willingness from the company side try to develop this kind of methods and approaches. All right, I think that was all for me. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul. As usual, when you talk, I get too interested, so I forget the time. It's how it is when it's fun. But I would like to invite maybe Sohail and Flor to bring up a few of the questions we have seen in the Q&A. I want to say also that we collect the questions in the Q&A afterwards, and we'll process them together with the presenters. So we hope to provide you with answers at some point, even though maybe not all answers today. Sohail, please.
Yes. Thank you, Paul, for the great presentation. We have a couple of questions about the methodology, about the indicator. So the questions, I think we can summarize them in a sense that how did you come up with those 7 indicators? Was it also coming out of that discussion with the experts, or was it the fixed set of indicators? And also there are some questions about, because it seems that the focus is on the trees, what about other component of the ecosystem in the forest that we have, soil, fungi, and other components, are they also included, or how we can include them if not?
Thank you so much. Yes, this method developed by Linner et al. It has been used both for agriculture products, and then the indicators are different. And they have suggested a list of relevant indicators, and they did a study for Finnish forestry and forest products. So we started with that list, but we selected the most important that we saw from a South Swedish forestry perspective, and also added, in this case, of course, we added a logging residue, recovery level, and etc. So we modify this, or I say we, I mean the experts that we involved in this study. So it was, we started with a list, and then we revised that list, added things, removed things, depending on what the experts saw as the most important at this region. And of course, this is not complete at all. And I think that's a very good question about other soil quality, fungi, everything that could be very important indicators that we don't cover here. So of course, especially if we start with genetic biodiversity and things like that, it could be other indicators that needs to be covered in the future. So this is the start. I think this is the first time it's tested on this specific fuel, logging residues. So there is a lot of work going that needs to be done to cover more and more relevant parameters here.
Thank you, Paul. Flor, have you any additional thing to bring in here?
Yeah, thank you. Joran, and thank you, Paul. Maybe follow up on based on your answer. There's a question: to what extent would this also be applicable to tropical forests, or what would be needed to make it applicable for tropical forests?
Yeah, no, it's the idea with this method is that it could be applied for tropical forests also, but of course, then we need to revise the list even more, I guess, and also once again work with experts, try to identify the most crucial parameters here for tropical forest, and yeah, it should be usable, and we could use that, but of course we then need even more adaptation to the specific conditions in this area with tropical forests. So yeah.
So Paul, maybe there is a question also about the long-term view of biodiversity, because it seems that, for example, removing residuals, I mean, the question is that if we don't remove them, also it will risk higher the risk of wildfires in some areas because it's a fuel for fires, and then there might be more loss of biodiversity down the road. So how do you account for this kind of aspects, that the consequences of removal on the biodiversity in the future and so on?
Yeah, it's a very relevant question, and the answer is that we don't include that now. We haven't included it now, but that's another very important field to work more with and look into the long term and maybe more indirect effects also of this. So that's another limitation of the model today, or we more or less looked at the more short term aspects here, but that's yeah, it's a very relevant question, and so we need to work with that too in the future.
Thank you, Paul, for the answers. Maybe just one last before we continue. We really have to continue, but it's so interesting. So, I mean, you had an expert pool that contributed to the grading, for instance, of indicator importance. And the question is then, is it easier for them to agree or not? And would you see like a process here that if this would be somehow extended and maybe connecting to, for instance, ISO standards and so on, we would have some kind of ongoing committee work to maintain a database of updated information, I guess, on.
Yeah, in this case, I was surprised that the expert was quite. They come up with these common conclusions, and of course there were discussions and so on. So I think, and one thing is really important when you put together this expert panel, that we also identify crucial areas or expert areas that we need to include, because that was one thing that we started with a smaller group, and then the expert said, this is a very important field or aspect, we need experts covering that too. So I mean, and I think also, as I said, this is the local regional conditions differ so much, so the expert must be expert on this specific geographical place you're working with. So when we come to standardization and so on, I think the overall approach could be standardized, but then of course we when we pinpoint crucial parameters and so on, we need experts that have great knowledge about the local regional conditions here to cover the crucial aspects.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Paul. And thanks for the presentation and discussing some of these outstanding issues we have to deal with here. I will now turn to the second part of the webinar, where we have two presentations first, and that is then followed by a moderated discussion in the end. So first now I would like to invite Per Angelstam, who will speak on biodiversity considerations in forest management and planning, and then focusing specifically on mapping conservation value of forests. So Per, good to have you here. Please, the word is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I have to get rid of there is a thing that is hiding my screen. Okay, thank you. So this presentation is about how a map of relative forest naturalness can be used. I have a long background in working with biodiversity of different kinds, both processes and structures and species. And this research that I'm going to talk about now, it stems from three different research products. One is about indicators for green infrastructure in forest landscape. So basically functional habitat networks for the long-term survival of populations of species. And then it's also about forest management systems. So in the Nordic countries, we have a long history of making clear cuts and doing rotation forestry for an effective production of biomass. But then the question is, what alternatives are there, and what do different forest owners want to do, and what are the opportunities and challenges of doing that? And then I'm also working with cultural landscapes. I was actually working in Puglia in Italy a couple of weeks now recently. So I work with grasslands, I work with woodlands, and I work with forests. And we have a EU project about cultural landscape. So actually biodiversity in different contexts is my theme. This presentation will serve as a sort of advertisement. So I want to advertise 5 different papers. So you will all be able to get this presentation, and then you can find the papers that are all open access. So the first paper is about conservation value of forest, and we can actually map this by spatial modeling at the scale of 100 by 100 meters. And this has been a collaboration with GIS and modeling persons and different kinds of ecologists. We have then used this database or this modeling exercise to assess the extent to which habitat networks of the main forest species in Sweden are functional or not. And the short answer is that they are functional if you look at the remote areas close to the mountains in the north, but in the majority of the country, they are not functional, and there is a need for landscape planning to cope with that. Looking out through Europe, there are a lot of things to be learned by how different countries cope with challenges to produce desired values from forests. So this is a study that we published recently in Nature Scientific Reports, which looks into whether one can explain where you have continuous cover forestry methods and where you have clear cutting methods. And you can actually do that based on a combination of biophysical, anthropogenic, and socioeconomic variables. So countries have chosen to do things that match them, which is quite interesting. However, they are not good at biodiversity conservation, which sort of stresses that you need something else. And there is a new term called closer to nature forest management, which is about emulating natural disturbance regimes. And then finally, I will just mention with a few words a study that we did on trying to understand how do different countries in Europe subdivide forests for biodiversity conservation, for multiple use, and for wood production. So as a short abstract of what I will be telling, this work is focusing on producing a wall-to-wall map showing the relative level of forest naturalness. And this means simply things like canopy height, variation in canopy cover, many of the variables that we heard in the previous talk, dead wood of different kinds, both standing and lying, species, tree species richness, but also socioeconomic aspects, including forest roads, so access. So this database, it covers 22 million 1 hectare pixels, and it has been modeled by comparing presence and absence of high conservation value forests which have been identified in the field, and using 128 open access variables which capture landscape structure, different spatial scales, and socioeconomic dimensions. And what is really important is that we've also validated this modeling exercise by using empirical data which is completely independent. We have made sure it's freely available because the modeling input is open access. And then I will mention a couple of examples of applying this kind of database, namely spatial prioritization of green infrastructures, and also learning about how to plan towards multifunctional landscapes that can both deliver biomass production, wood, multiple use, and biodiversity conservation. So the procedure was to use the field study made by various authorities compiling forests of high conservation value forests, and then we also chose random points. And the modeling exercise integrates then a large number of variables, and we divided Sweden into 4 different parts because they are quite different. And if we just look at the northern most part of Sweden, so this shows that the distribution of different variables. So, for example, slope, simply how steep the terrain is. Here, the relative likelihood of high conservation value increases with slopes. So the steeper it is, the more natural forest. This is about altitude. It's about height of trees, and also not only the height itself, but also the variance, the presence of roads. And then the portfolio of variables differs a little bit among the different regions. Then we got hold of the State Forest Company's forest management plan. And this is based on field assessments of different aspects of the gradient from production of wood to high conservation value forests with a number of categories in between. And the red line shows the mean value and this relative likelihood. So the opportunity of a forest to host high conservation value forest, it matches the forest company's ranking of forest stands across the different regions. We also use data from the National Forest Inventory, where they make field assessments in the National Forest Inventory's field plots, and they rank forests with respect to naturalness. And again, the pattern matches the relative likelihood. So, summarizing, Swedish forests make up 27 million hectares. This is almost 60% of the land area. We also have forests which have been harvested recently, which we did not assess. So the map covers 22 million hectares. But it changes very rapidly because thinnings and clear cuts are taking place. So what remains now is about 17 million hectares. So just to show you what naturalness means. These are two pictures of boreal forest landscapes. The picture on the left comes from close to the Ural Mountains in Russia, and it shows a boreal forest with high species richness, lots of vertical structure, lots of dead wood, no roads, so basically no human impact whatsoever. And the picture on the right shows a typical managed forest landscape, and this has resulted in a deliberate transition from a naturally dynamic ecosystem to a cropping system that maximizes wood production. So the question we are faced with now is which areas in the landscape with high naturalness are most effective to conserve. So basically, less than 5% of forests in Sweden are subject to conservation. And the question is, how do you choose? And then we have a number of conservation tools. We can work with formal protection, voluntary set-aside within in the framework of forest certification. You can work with tree retention. You can work with leaving unproductive forests. You can choose forest management system. Now it's also actual to discuss nature restoration. And of course, you can protect areas with high conservation value, which are not protected. But what is really important is to not only look at the area extent of these conservation tools, but actually the extent to which they work. So how do they work as green infrastructure tools? And then you need to look, of course, at what is the total area, but also the quality. And then our mapping of high conservation value forests comes in as something useful. You can assess the size of forest areas. You can assess the ability of species to move across the landscape. So this is called connectivity. And you can also look at for how long time they will last. So in one of these papers I mentioned, we reported habitat modeling. So for each of a number of forest types, 4 types, we chose different naturalness ranks. We selected sufficiently large patches, and we selected areas with high concentration of suitable patches. And then we produced maps of Sweden. So these maps show for the 4 species which allows mapping wall to wall. Pine forest, spruce and mixed spruce forest, deciduous forest, and broadleaf deciduous forest. And there are empirical knowledge base on the proportion of a local landscapes that needs to be subject to conservation. And on these maps, there are green areas, and they include small areas, 5-hectare areas, which together cover 5% of the local landscape. So you could match this to species that require functional habitat networks, but they have lower demands. And then the red areas are the areas which have a cover of 30% of such patches. And this is the red areas are basically confined to the mountain range in the northwestern part of Sweden. And then the inset map just shows some examples. So this is a kind of data which we have provided all the county administrations in Sweden to support their work in terms of selecting areas for protection, management, or restoration. A lot of things happen to these forests, and I think the main challenge now is sort of an arms race between funding to set aside high conservation value forests on the one hand, and harvesting them to provide the raw material for the industry. And these colors from red, orange, yellow, green, blue show the level of naturalness. So the red areas are the best ones. The orange ones, they correspond to Swedish nature reserves, and the green, the yellow, and the blue relate to typically managed forests. But the logging rate of these high conservation value forests is quite high, and in fact, the highest rate is found in forests with the quality of similar to protected areas, and about 22% of the harvest in final fellings in Sweden actually comes from high conservation value forest. So we are in a quite difficult situation when it comes to conservation. Not enough funding to set aside areas, and a great hunger for wood. Biodiversity conservation can also be concerned with different levels of ambition. I will not go through in this, but it's interesting in the paper. You can look at later on. And finally, the question is how to handle this in the future. And then there is a term called triad. So one approach to forest management is to integrate in the same forest stand production, conservation, and multiple use. Another approach is to do segregation, to separate habitat conservation from biomass conservation. But triad means that you try to combine this at the landscape level. And we published a paper where we tried to assess the distribution of reserve, intensive, and extensive in different countries in Europe. And it shows that the interpretation of triad is quite different, but also very inspiring to see how other countries try to solve this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Per, and I'm sorry if I rushed you in the end there, but potentially we get back to also showing slides when discussing in the end here. I think for ending now this theme, I will turn directly to Just Ole Eriksson, who will address the same issue, biodiversity conservations in forest management and planning, but now discussing implications for wood supply and forest carbon. So what will be the implications of using this mapping material that Per and his colleague have provided through their research? Please, Ola, I give the word to you now.
Thank you, Göran, and thank you, Per, also for explaining some of the details of the natural value map that I will then go into trying to see what are the consequences of applying this on a national scale, asking if we go for using this map as a tool for or a strategy for developing nature protection, what would be actually the consequences for the sector when it comes to different aspects? And we who are working here, you see the research group, Göran, you know, I'm Ola, and then we have people from Chalmers, from Linnaeus, and from Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences as well. What I should then have, the question is what it could mean to use this map as a strategy for protecting the forest or having that as a basis for setting aside forest areas which are currently used. I'm talking about productive forest, not the one that is unproductive. And the aspects I would like to go through is to have a bit of look on the economic outcome, then what happens with the production in the sector, primarily with the sawmill production, harvests as is behind that. Old forest as an aspect of the biodiversity something about the climate change consequences of using it, and looking at where does this restoration or protection activities take place. So looking at that on a national scale, and the reason why we are able to do that is that we have a wonderful forest sector model here, which then combines commodity flows and price signals. So we have built together something that has to do with the forest module, which essentially is based on national forest inventory plots spread over Sweden. We have the industry there, and we have a lot of transports connecting these activities.
Ola, just to
Yes.
check, to be certain, right now you are introducing your slides, or have you already started showing?
Oh,
slides?
sorry. I have forgotten to share them.
Okay. It was a very nice introduction. No problem.
Sorry for that. So maybe now you are better able to follow the slides here. I should get back to the presentation as well myself. So now you see it, I hope.
No, we still see you. I think you need to switch the screens probably.
We tested this, didn't we? So let's go now.
Now it looks promising. Starting. Yeah, now we are there.
Okay,
Great.
so I should
Thanks.
point at that. Right. So there you are with the forest sector model, which brings together these different modules, and then you have the, so to say, the commodity flow going in one direction and satisfying the market here. So you have the consumers or the buyers of the semi-finished products there, which is then sawmill products, it's packaging material, it's market pulp, etc., etc. So different products entering the market, and when the consumers buy the products, they then send back price signals, which the agents of this model is reacting to. So we populate it with forest owners and industrialists and so forth, and they will then be active in managing their resources in order to maximize their profits. And we are running this then for an extended period of time. I will show you results up till the end of this century. And once we have then set this engine in motion and we have got a solution, we can then look at different aspects that are not basically in the model as such, but we look at the carbon balance or biodiversity aspects and so forth, as far as the data that we have are able to indicate this. So with this analysis tool, we have done trying to see what does the implementation of the natural value map mean, the NVK. But to make it a little bit more interesting, let's contrast this one to the procedure that we have today, or what could be the procedure, the business as usual. And what is the business as usual in this case? Well, what other research team has been analyzing and also published is an analysis of the National Forest Inventory data, looking at what has been protected over time. So they have then developed a function that depends on, well, diameter, amount of deadwood, age, and other factors. And on the basis of this function, you could get a relative priority number that tells you, okay, this seems to be the most important kind of habitat, or in essence, the National Forest Inventory plot that has been protected. So I use this one to, anyway, simulate what could be the way that we could protect forest in the same way as we have done. So a kind of business as usual kind of priority order. National Value Map, the NVK, then. What we have done here is that we have overlaid the map on the National Forest Inventory plots. Maybe you don't see it, but the red dots here are the National Forest Inventory plots. And then we have seen, well, where do we have a high value and where do we have no value, etc., and use that for making a priority for how we should pick the National Forest Inventory plots for protection. So if we have a plot here with a high value, we will put that at the top of the priority. And when there is no value, of course, then it will have no priorities. So we take that in that order. And then see, well, will it make any difference if we do it in one way or the other? And let's say today we have then about almost 10% that is protected. It's formally protected and it's voluntary protected as well, 2.2 million hectares. Let's see what happens if we, from that basis, increase the area with 50% or 100%, so we double the area of protected. So the already protected area is already in the bottom here. And let's start then with the economics, because I think that will show quite a lot. And it appears that if we increase the area of protected forest, according to the business as usual kind of doing it, it is more costly than doing it by the national value map. Don't take the numbers here too literally, but it's quite clear that it's more cheap to increase the area according to the map rather than the way that we seems to have done it before. So why is it cheaper? Or what constitutes the NVK solution here? Well, one is to look at the production, and the most pronounced outcome is in terms of sawmill production. So you can see that the sawmill production here is much more affected if we then follow this diagram. So here you have what you have today, could have today, if we don't increase the area of protected forest. The green one is the NVK, where we increase it by 100%, I should say. I don't take the 50% because it's just in between and it makes it a bit messy. So please, it's the 100% increase I'm illustrating here. If we go for the business as usual kind of increase, we will have a much greater effect on the production. There is effects on the pulp and paper production as well, but it's not so pronounced, I should say. So what's behind this number? Why does it behave like this? Well, one thing is the harvest. It is the business as usual protection strategy means that you have a reduces harvest much more, and that is also then reflected in the sawmill production there. So it limits the harvest to a greater extent than the NVK approach. Going into what the is more the constituent parts of the harvest here. We could look at the age of the final fellings that we have. And what you can see here is that this is how it is today. The NVK does not very much affect the age of the final harvest, but the business as usual does. So what we can guess here is that with the business as usual, you take older forest into the protected forest, and you have to take younger forest here, and that would have an economic effect. It would also have an effect on the forest that we leave behind. So in the way that we do it, we leave more old forest, and we will get an increase of forest over time, of old forest, which is not so pronounced with leaving or protecting it according to the NVK strategy. Okay, that's the forest and the forest management and some aspects around that. And then we have tried to calculate also the effects on the carbon balance, which might be more complex in a way, but let's see if we can sort it out. So the net carbon emissions here, which includes both what's happening in the forest and what happens on the product side with the substitution factors and everything. So if we look on the total net carbon emissions here, and then we should, of course, say that the more that we can take out from the atmosphere, the better. So the more negative we are here, the better it is. And we can see that the climate effect is better with the ordinary way of doing things rather than going with the national, with the nature value map, at least in the beginning. The difference is on the other hand not very big, and that's a bit surprising, isn't it? If you think about the way that we limited harvest to a much greater extent with the BAU compared to the NVK. So we think that by reducing harvest, we would get a better carbon emissions effect here. So let's look at the two different sides of it, the forest side and the product side. And we can see that they are, with the calculations that we have done, which are, as you know, uncertain when it comes to substitution, when it comes to soil carbon, etc. But anyway, it might show some tendencies here. And in the forest, it is better for the first decades to have the BAU, to save old forest. So there you have a better climate effect from that. But since you are producing less, you get less substitution, and you have a reduction of the storage of forest products as well. So it balances out quite a lot for this initial period anyway. So for what happens on the national scale, let's have a quick look on where this protection plays out with the two different strategies. How is time, Göran? Is okay, I hope.
Yeah, we are actually getting close to finishing time. So you are in the moderated discussion time window right now.
So I'll finish off here quite rapidly, just showing that it makes a difference in what region you are. If this is the protected areas we have today, this is how much it would be if we increase it by 100% there and 100% with this one. And you can see that there is more of an increase in this region with NVK. It's less in this region than business as usual. It's less with NVK than BSU in this one, and it's definitely more in this region. So it might be that what we have here is something like less of protection kind of forest in this region, and a guess which Per might comment on is that could it be a legacy here, because these areas here are the ones that have been used for a very long time in mining, etc. So if going for MVK, might that be not a paradigm shift, I would say, but could it be more efficient? And do we get the same or more of biodiversity and effective values in that way? So here is my dog, promised he should always be alone. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Ola. Great. Per, it would be nice to also bring you, start your camera so we can also see you while we have the discussion now. So I noted on the Q&A now that Paul has been extremely active answering questions. Probably when he got up to speed, he also answered questions on behalf of the two of you. I don't know, or maybe all the questions were about the biodiversity impact in LCA. We have one question here. So Hale, maybe I just read it out loud as it is only one question so far. I have a couple of questions of my own then. So the question from Anna Berg-Grimstad, how do you predict that the map might help with acceptability of protection among forest owners? For example, have you discussed the potential use of the map for finding compensation sites? I guess that's directed to you, Per, in the first place, right?
Yes, yeah, I understood the question, and I think the answer is that this is a matter of politics. So if a government is unwilling to compensate landowners for setting aside some kind of infrastructure, this could be to support road building or something else, but it could also be to protect forests as part of functional habitat networks. So I think the studies I'm aware of shows that if forest owners get paid, and then in Sweden the rules are actually quite beneficial because you get higher payment for setting aside forest than for logging it. But the thing is that the amount of money available for this is too limited, and also the process of payment are too slow. So I think it's a matter of politics, and then it becomes also a matter of let's say the power among different stakeholders. So if the industry is very keen on getting wood, they are not supporting politics that would reduce the flow of wood. So it can be handled, but it's a matter of if decision makers want it or not. It's not a problem on the side of the forest owners, and especially not non-industrial private forest owners, because as a non-industrial private forest owner like myself, the way to earn income is to sell wood. But if I would represent a forest industry company, actually forestry is not very profitable, but it's the production of value-added products which is profitable. So if you are smart as an industry to produce high value products and perhaps modify your value chains, you can compensate the amount of wood available with a higher price for your product. For example, by working with biorefineries rather than to do paper.
Could I add something there?
Yes, please.
I assume that the natural value map is per hectare is offers the same biodiversity value as the old way of doing it. I mean, the problem of compensation and so forth would and also the interest of the forest industry would be ameliorated. It would be easier to handle this problem if this approach is as efficient in biodiversity terms as what we're doing.
A related topic here is how large should an area that you set aside be? The National Forest inventory plots, they have a radius of 30 meters or something like that. So it's much less than 1 hectare. So the larger the patch of a forest you have, the more likely is that it's going to work for conservation. And actually 1 hectare pixels is a bit too small. So therefore we recommend that you should rather look at local landscapes which are maybe 3 by 3 pixels, so 300 by 300 meters. That would be a minimum to make decisions, and that would actually reduce the risk that you set aside areas which are very small and have very poor value in terms of biodiversity conservation. So it would be more effective to set aside larger areas where the effectiveness of each pixel is higher than individual very small pixels.
Could I comment very quickly on that?
Very quickly. And
yeah.
after that, I will ask Per one question, while you, as a compensation, Ola, will read the question from Jonas Jakobsson in the Q&A and try to answer that one. But first, please comment.
What I would, the analysis now was on National Forest Inventory plot scale. What I would like to do is to do this on forest owner property scale. So you pick out those and then do the simulation.
Good idea.
Thank you.
I'm glad to be in the same project.
Yes.
So Per, I have a question to you, and Ola, now you promised me to read the question from Jonas Jakobsson in the meantime. So Per, now you have shown this mapping activity that you did in Sweden. You also showed a few maps from other places in Europe, but can you think about repeating if one would want to repeat the procedure to map naturalness in other countries? I mean, what do you think about data availability and the cost related to these type of exercises? I know from your paper you refer quite much to open data, so there is quite much open data already. Can you just talk a little bit about the replicability of this procedure?
Yeah, I think that in principle, I mean, the procedure is possible to apply anywhere, but what is limiting is one, knowledge about where do you have your high conservation value forest areas, so you can train the model, and also knowledge about where there is no conservation value forest. But then some variables require quite limited, let's say, advanced technology. So, for example, if you have a digital elevation model and if you have some kind of laser scanning approach, there are many, you could actually come quite far. And I think we often tend to think about conservation as a way to find areas that have high conservation value forests. But a model can also be used to identify where there are no or very limited high conservation value forests, which would then be suitable for choosing to make, let's say, more intensive forest management, and also to avoid spending time looking for high conservation value forests where the probability is very, very low. So you can still make the planning process much more effective, even if the precision of the data is not very good.
Okay, that's very promising, actually. Great, thank you, Per. I know some of the organizers here are now nervous. I usually love to stay longer than planned. Before rounding off here now, I would like to turn back to you, Ola. I can see that you are typing an answer from Jonas. Sorry, Jonas' question there.
Yes, I'm trying to.
Yes, but can you just answer directly now, and maybe we go back to writing answers to the remaining questions after finishing here?
To answer the question by Jonas.
Yes.
I don't, I'm not sure I fully understand it, and maybe it has more to do with the competence of Per, actually. If you talk about the conservation value of harvested, respectively, or harvested forest in different phases of development, that is how I understand the question. Have you read it, Per and
Yes,
Korthusen?
I read it. Hello, Jonas. You write that the mapped conservation value is highly correlated with forest age. In principle, this is true when you use National Forest Inventory data, but in our modeling exercise, we actually don't use forest age because this is not something that is open access. So there is no forest age in our model at all. But it's rather the structure, the vertical structure. So if the canopies are at different heights, if the variance is very high, so simply there is a structural variability at the local scale and at different scales, and especially if you have larger areas with let's say diverse canopy structure, that indicates high conservation value forest. So I think. And I will read further down. Thus mapped high conservation where berries are more likely to be harvested. And if they actually develop into high conservation value forests, that's something that we will see in the future. But if you look at the amount of, let's say, nature consideration, so simply how many trees you leave after thinnings or clear fellings, the volumes or proportions of trees left, living or dead, is very, very low. So it's unlikely that a managed forest, even with good considerations, nature considerations today, will actually develop into high quality, high conservation value forests in the future. So I think the remnants of high conservation value forests, they are perhaps not irreplaceable, but it takes a very long time to replace them if they disappear. Especially because final felling ages are becoming lower and lower. Where I live in central Sweden, it's about 60 years. So much lower than even 50 years ago.
Okay, thank you, Per. I think where there was, yeah, we are getting closer to, we are over time now. We have one question more unanswered. We will answer that in writing, I propose. So Hale, do you have any final insights to share, or?
No, I think yeah, all the three presentations were very useful and it created lots of questions. So I'm happy to see that the audience were very engaged and definitely looking forward to continuing these discussions in the future setups and webinars. Yeah, thank you all.
Yeah, thanks from me also, and as a reminder then that the recorded session will be placed on the IEA Bioenergy website together with also presentations. We could maybe end if you just show your uptake, this thing that one can scan to learn more about uptake. So
Yeah.
people who entered late in this session, you will have the opportunity to read more about the EU project that was part of organizing this event here now together with IEA Bioenergy. So Helge will show that.
Yes, the problem is I close my presentation,
Yeah,
but
okay.
yeah, but if people just search, Google it, International Conference on Carbon Dioxide Removal, with the keyword like Milan or CMCC uptake, you will find the website, and the registration will open next week. So looking forward to having you there.
Great, thank you. Then I think I end the webinar here. Grateful to all three presenters. It was wonderful to have you here and share your results and insights. And also thanks for answering many of the questions already. So we are actually almost free from working with this afterwards. Thanks a lot for that. Thanks also to all the audience who listened to the webinar. It was great to see this big interest. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.